climate champions. Welcome to yet another episode of the Climate Network. Today's guest is an IFS officer from the 2001 Kerala cadre and has been working intensively and extensively on the protection of forests and wildlife. She is presently the Deputy Inspector General of Forest Central, Regional Office, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Odisha. Welcome, Padma ma'am. I hope I got that right.
Yes.
For listeners who would not know what a DIG forest officer does, how does your day look like?
It's my day is very interesting. In our regional office, Bhubaneswar, we look after 3 states. That's Odisha, West Bengal, and Sikkim. And all the development projects, like the infrastructure projects, the linear projects, like roads, railways, the mining projects, this office is instrumental in giving the land diversion for these projects, especially when it is a forest land, involves a forest land. So we do scrutinize these proposals that we get. We do site inspections. We impose conditions when we give conditional approvals, depending upon the number of area. And then we monitor the conditions that we have imposed. Forests are worked with forest working plans. These are documents that are prepared by the state government. So they come to us for approvals. So we scrutinize the forest working plans, which are the best documents for working the forest or managing the forest. So my day is quite interesting in the regional office change.
So what is your takeaway from your time in ecotourism?
So ecotourism, again, is something very close to my heart. And I feel that, it is not only a tool for conservation, but it also is a tool to gather voices for conservation. And that is how, but it has to be done in the right way, in the right spirit. And there are 4 tenets of ecotourism. Ecotourism should be ecologically viable and economically sustainable. And it has to be legally permissible. There are so many rules, acts, laws. The recent guidelines of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change 2022 talks about how ecotourism should be done in the wildlife areas or the forest areas. That has to be implemented with the right spirit, with the carrying capacity study. Ecotourism is not about large number of tourists entering the forest areas. It is about low impact and high value tourism with a conservation and a nature education component. So it has to be done that way, and it has to be socially acceptable, because when we open up our forests to ecotourism, it's not just that we are opening up the habitats of the wildlife, we are also intruding into the habitation of the people who are staying there. So it's a very, very sensitive subject, and it needs a lot of planning, lot of thoughts, lot of training, and more in the soft skills of the people who are doing it than in creating structures. Creating structures inside forests should be the last thing that should be done in ecotourism. It's a wonderful concept, but there's a very thin line of where it goes wrong. So there has to be a very thin line in managing the ecotourism concept across the country. So after that, in 2020, I came to Odisha on a central deputation to the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change's regional office. So I am right now here as Deputy Inspector General of Forest, and yes, my day is very interesting here too.
Wow. This is amazing. There are so many questions I want to ask you right now, and I don't know where to begin. Given that the experience of working with people, wildlife and forest cover as a habitat, you've had a lot of experience talking to everybody. How important is it to get the community involved in protection of forests and protection of wildlife, and whether the groups that you work with are willing to do so?
So there is also, I think, to a certain extent, the human-wildlife conflict. That is also a very major issue nowadays in India. That also has become a challenge for the forest officers. I think maybe 20 years back, we were not dealing so much with human-wildlife conflict as we deal now.
Could you explain that a little more?
See, human-wildlife conflict is a conflict between the human beings and the wildlife. So it is two ways. It is wildlife straying into the human habitations, and there is a conflict. Maybe they come into the close to the human habitations. The wildlife raids the crops, and then they are attacked by human beings. Sometimes the wildlife gets injured or gets killed. Many times the human beings also get injured. They get killed. So it is a two-way process where the wildlife is also in danger. The human beings are in danger, and with the growing population of both wildlife. In many cases, our tigers are back. We have a very good population of elephants in the country. So the big cat number is increasing, and the human population is also increasing. And now, right now, if you see forests, they are like islands amid human-dominated landscapes. So human wildlife conflict is here to stay, and it will be more in future. Only thing we have to know how to manage it properly, and that is where maybe technology comes to play. Early warning systems come to play. Use of technology, dissemination of information comes into play, and then we need to ask each other, where do the numbers matter? How much the numbers matter so far as the wildlife is concerned, so far as ecotourism is concerned. In ecotourism also we talk about tourists numbers increasing in ecotourism destinations. Does number matter there? That is a question which we as responsible citizens have to ask each other. So that is what I feel is my little experience so far in the climate change scenario or the wildlife scenario. One more thing is, a lot of cultivars which were there many years ago, they have almost gone, and I think 50% of the bird species are dwindling. They're no more to be seen. What we as children we used to see so many birds in our backyards. I think they're no more seen nowadays. So climate change is impacting every section or every part of our life and livelihood, and not just the biodiversity, our food habits, our culture, our lifestyle, everything. So that is where we need to consciously feel what needs to be done at this point of time. Communities, people are part of our ecosystem. It's a pro planet people. So we cannot see communities away from wildlife or forest. Communities are part of our whole ecosystem. We are part of the whole ecosystem in which we are living. So community involvement in forest management becomes the major, one of the key ingredients in any intervention that you plan to do or you wish to do. So that is how I feel that the communities which live in and around the forest, in the fringe forest areas, their involvement and is the key in any successful project, any project to be successful.
But are they willing to help?
Definitely, yes, because they have an organic relationship with forest.
Yes.
And forest is not just the gamut or just the work of just a handful of forest officers.
Agreed.
So once the community is involved and the community agrees, why the community agrees? Because they have an organic relationship with forest, and they need the forest much more than anybody. For everything they're dependent on forest, for their firewood or for their NTFPs, the non-timber forest produce, for their livelihood, they are dependent so much on forest. But only thing that which we need to do now is to see that there is no over exploitation of the forest resources. There has to be sustainable harvesting protocols. There has to be sustainable management of the forest resources. And the communities are such wonderful people that if they are on board, they form the second line of protection in any forest management, and they are the social capital. You talk about a financial capital. Once you have the communities on board, you enhance your social capital. The more the social capital, more the wildlife will thrive, more the forest will thrive.
I have had the privilege to talk to people from the community, and the conversation was such that in the whole world, for 90% of forest land, we have 5% of tribal population, and the responsibility falls on them to protect the forests, because urbanization is going on at a speed that we can't keep up with. And isn't it not wrong exactly, but isn't it expecting a lot from them when we say that, we need people from the community to come in and help? Of course, their livelihood depends on it, but of course, they are the first ones who are also impacted by climate change and forest deforestation for that matter.
See, I'll give you the Periyar example. Periyar, as I told you, is known for the participatory management. So here, it is for us to, how you engage the communities. Before, the forest was their home, and they had a free access to the forest, and you declare it as a sanctuary, and then certain rights which they had, privileges they had before, they are definitely curtailed. So how do you reduce whatever they were doing in the past, like the negative dependency, to a positive dependency? So you have to design vocations or employment, livelihood options for them with an organic link with the forest. That is where I said ecotourism is a wonderful tool. In Periyar, if you see, we have, I think, 15 ecotourism programs. And if you go to the Periyar Forest Department website and look at every ecotourism program came up for a cause, and to negate to a certain, to cater to a certain problem or a issue. Like, I'll give you two beautiful examples. In one, there was a group of poachers, smugglers, who would smuggle cinnamon bark from inside the forest, and they used to use a raft to do that. So what the Kerala Forest Department or the Periyar team, which was working there with the communities, did is that they started mentoring them, and they converted them into protectors of the park, and they created a program, trekking program for them, called the Tiger Trail, Periyar Tiger Trail. And the same raft which they used to use for carrying the illegal cinnamon out of the forest, it was used to carry the visitors or the tourists in the forest. And that is a very prized program. And I think it is one of the highly prized programs in the Kerala forest, in the Periyar Tiger Reserve now. And similarly, I'll talk to you about one more in which I was involved, partly towards the second part of it, when there were a group of poachers from Tamil Nadu. And they were the elephant tusk poachers and ganja cultivators, and they were hardcore smugglers. And when I was there during my training, they had already surrendered. And so I was part of their reformation and their transformation phase. And finally, we confederated them into a eco-development committee. And they are even now a part of Periyar's protection force. And that is India's first transboundary initiative. So here also, what did we do? We raised their social strata, social status, and the recognition. Earlier they were poachers. Now they protect the forest. They have a uniform. They're a part of the protection force. They earn a decent livelihood by protecting the forest, and they don't have to go and they get caught by the police or the forest staff every day. So that is where I feel that the involvement of the officials going beyond their duty, is what is needed if you have to go for such kind of innovations and transformations, which is needed to work with the community and to bring the community into the fold of forest management. We have had communities who have done tiger monitoring, who are much better naturalists than even any naturalists in the country, from the local communities, from the tribal communities. They have won international awards. They have identified new bird species. They have added new bird species to the bird list, new butterflies to the butterfly list. So the list is endless. So communities, I think, are wonderful to work with. And without communities' support, community participation, I don't think forest management in India would go that far, or we like rephrasing my words, I would say that community participation is needed if forest and wildlife management has to succeed in the country.
These are also very sustainable practices that
Yes.
you do. You inculcate what exists with something new.
And you don't have to teach to feed the person. You have to teach him to fish. So once the person knows to sustain himself with the positive dependency on forest, and his social status is enhanced by doing so, then I think they would never go back to what they were doing earlier. And at the same time, you are not breaking the organic link with the forest. You are not, or the umbilical cord is not being severed by you taking them out and making them to do things.
Rehabilitating them.
That I feel that, the keeping an organic link with the forest is a wonderful thing, which keeps their culture alive, keeps their tradition alive, keeps their traditional knowledge alive, that traditional cultural expressions alive. So a lot of things have to be thought about. These are very sensitive things which needs a lot of thought to plan, and these sensitively have to be planned. It needs a lot of thoughts, lot of insight, lot of involvement of the planners in planning such programs where community is involved.
I won't be wrong when I say this, that we are on a rampant development track. Within this developmental narrative that is going on, where do you see forest conservation and forest protection?
Well, it's a very, very interesting question. And I would say that, yes, India is in a development phase now. And there are we are going for more roads, more railway networks, and we are going for development when India is going to aspiring for the 5 trillion economy. So then you ask me where we see our forests. See, for every land that is diverted for any developmental project, be it a linear project, be it any other project, be it a mining project, there is by rules and by laws enacted, the Forest Conservation Act 1980, it says that you have to give equal number of non-forest land for the land diverted. So land for land is compensated in most of the cases. And then you come to tree for tree, the trees that are cut. How do you compensate the trees for tree? So we have something called a compensatory afforestation program, which is done with the funds of the user agency or the project proponent, whosoever is taking up the project. They pay for growing the forest that is cut. But yes, if you technically ask me, you cannot regrow a natural forest within maybe our lifetime. We cut the forest, but we plant certain trees, certain species. Nowadays, we say that what is cut is to be planted. And the compensatory afforestation, by and large, to the extent possible, has to be in the same landscape where the project is being implemented to even out the environmental
Correct.
costs or the environmental degradation. So then now the question again arises is, how do you grow a near-natural forest or a natural forest? Because you have taken a forest, but you are growing a plantation. So again, I feel that, techniques like Miyawaki, where it talks about indigenous species, growth of indigenous species, and creating a near-natural forest with intensive planting techniques. There in Miyawaki, what you do is you create a forest floor, and then you start growing the plantation, which is multi-species, which is multi-canopy. You have trees, you have herbs, you have shrubs, you have climbers, as you see in a natural forest. So it would not be a natural forest, but yes, to some extent, it would be a near-natural forest. So I think the plantations that are being taken up, that have to be more natural in species, they have to be more intensive, and they have to have the kind of composition of the forest that is being cut for a particular project. So that is one way, we can
And
compensate.
the maintenance?
Maintenance is definitely done by the forest department. This is a job of the forest department to maintain these compensatory afforestation plantations, and they do it well. So only thing is that it has to be more intensive, and the faster the faster we are able to replace the trees cut, the trees for tree, the better it is for the environment and the conservation. And even in the G20 that took place recently, India hosted G20. We spoke about global land initiative, in which it says that by 2040, 50% of the degraded land has to be afforested. And even India the Indian presidency came up with something called Gandhinagar Implementation Roadmap and Gandhinagar Information Platform. These are two things where, which substantiates this global land initiative, where 50% of the degraded land, which is degraded either by mining or by forest fire, it has to be brought back to its natural habitat. So these are certain protocols or certain commitments that we have towards conserving forest. And this is not just for India, it is for so many other countries which voluntarily have come forward and voluntarily have vouched for reclaiming or restoring the degraded lands that are there for a better future. So I think forest management has a greener future, and forest development and conservation, scientific with the scientific inputs, can definitely go hand in hand. I will give you another important an example about railways. When we have these railway lines crossing the forested areas, railways or roads, that is needed by human beings. It's not for wildlife. The moment you create a road or a railway network inside any landscape or any wildlife area, it fragments the landscape. So for better management of the wildlife, and the wildlife, then they find it difficult to cross the railway line or the road, and many times you have to cut a lot of trees to create these infrastructures, which we feel are needed. So then how mindfully you do it? You create underpasses, you create overpasses for the smaller mammals, the mesopredators, which we talk about. In all our talks about the megafauna, the mesopredators are losing grounds. So the mesopredators are very important in our food chain. So the mesopredators conservation vis-a-vis the landscape becomes very important. And when we are talking about the large number of trees being cut, like if you create viaducts, like the raised platforms on which a railway line grows above the tree line, the railway line also exists and also the trees. Or if you create tunnels, you can save lakhs and lakhs of trees from being cut, and it is being done in many projects. When we post these conditions for our different linear projects, we do this. We also nowadays, in many of our projects, we talk about translocation of trees. So there is technology in which even a 200-year tree can be translocated and taken to another location. So this is how technology has to be used in forest management for better management of forest.
And how would you say is wildlife important in this development narrative?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. Why should wildlife be important to people? And taking your question a little forward, why are tigers important anyway? Why are tigers important anyway? So when you ask yourself this question, you should imagine a tiger in the forest. Not just imagine a tiger walking in the forest for camera sake. Also see the tiger as the apex predator in the food chain. And when the apex predator is healthy and hearty